Hello, my name is John Brink. We today here in beautiful downtown Prince George with a podcast on the Brink, and it is in British Columbia, beautiful British Columbia in the northern half, and the capital of the northern BC is Prince George. And today we have a special guest. Her name is Lucy Poirier, and Lucy is an amazing individual. I had the pleasure of meeting her a number of weeks ago, and she's a young lady that, I'm going to take the liberty of saying that she's likely in her early 20s, and that she is an air traffic controller on the Prince George Airport, YXS, and she will tell us all about all of that and many more things. Lucy, welcome to my program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, where are you from? Are you from British Columbia originally, or?
I am. I grew up in Langley, just outside of Vancouver.
Okay.
And I have 3 brothers and 4 sisters.
Okay, big family.
Big family. And when I was
Where
young,
do you fit in? Whole?
number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, growing up, very different from my siblings. In preschool, they say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I announced in front of everybody I was going to fly planes and ride motorcycles.
So why?
I don't really know kind of where it started, a few things, but my mom was adopted by a Dutch couple that immigrated to Canada.
Yeah.
And after school, they really wanted her to go and explore Europe, go and meet her family in the Netherlands. And she did so much traveling, and she had all these stories when we were growing up of all the places she had been and all the people she met and experience she had. And I think part of it for me, flying was going to be the career that took me to all these places and meeting all of these people. So right from a young age, super passionate, wanted to fly.
Yeah.
My mom was out grocery shopping one day, and she met air cadets out fundraising for the Royal Canadian Air Cadet program.
Yeah.
And she came home with brochures, and she said, if you work really hard, you can earn a scholarship to get your pilot's license.
How old were you then?
For free. I was 8 when I found out about the program.
Wow.
And
Still in Langley?
Still in Langley. That day I went home and I pulled up the application on the computer, printed it off, filled it out, dated it. You can't join Air Cadets until you're 12 years old. So 4 years later, I walked in with that same application, and they looked at the date on it. And they said, "This is a little dated. Let's get you a new one to fill out."
Yeah.
So from 12 to 19, I was a part of the Royal Canadian Air Cadets out of the Langley Airport. And I loved aviation, but there's so much to do in the cadet program. I got to learn survival skills and explore music skills and first aid. But my passion was aviation. I knew nothing when I started, but by the time I turned 19 and left, I had all this fundamental knowledge. I had a glider private license, a private pilot's license.
All in Langley?
All out of
at the airport in Langley?
No, they do the training in other places. So I did my glider license out of the military base in Comox.
Okay.
And I did my private license at the Victoria Flying Club.
Yeah, and YYJ.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Beautiful.
we both have flown there, and yeah.
Oh, I love the island.
Yeah, and especially the airport in Victoria in particular, and you are obviously an expert in this. I got my private license in Watson Lake in the Yukon in 1967, and then I got my training for my commercial at YYJ Victoria. And but they always told me, and you can relate to that as well, that if you can fly in Victoria, you can fly anywhere, because it's a complex. There is 3 runways that are all intermingled, and then it's a complex taxi system, and it's a busy airport, because there is private, a couple of schools, there is military, there is float planes overflying from Vancouver to Victoria Harbor, and
It is a busy airport, and it's not one I would want to work at as an air traffic controller. I remember when I did my training, I accidentally exited onto another runway, and the controller says to me, "You're not on the taxiway, you're on the runway." and I never made that mistake again.
No, no.
But no, it was very busy, and it definitely, you know, gave me the confidence going forward to be able to fly into other airports in the Lower Mainland.
So, just going back a bit
Sure.
again to the time you grew up. So, you went to high school, and you got your high school diploma, I presume, and
Yes.
then from there on in terms of your schooling, where did you go then?
I really developed a passion for the military through my exposure with the Air Cadets, and so my goal of becoming a pilot when I was younger it just developed into, you know, okay, what specific kind of pilot do I want to be? How am I going to get that training? Where am I going to get it? So my dream was to be a search and rescue pilot with the military, flying buffaloes out of Comox.
Yeah.
So while I was still in high school, I was writing the aptitude tests for the military and doing interviews and all the preparation physically, mentally to get ready. I had, you know, put forward applications. One year they even called me to advance my application, and I said, I still haven't quite finished high school yet. So they said, okay, we'll call you back. And so as I was going through that process, I hadn't applied to any other universities. That is where I was going and what I was doing. And then it came to the medical assessment portion of my application, and you have to submit all of your medical history and records. And they looked back and they said, oh, as a kid, your family doctor thought you had asthma. And I said, I don't have asthma. I've never had asthma. No. I've gone to the hospital and done the tests and the tubes and the breathing to show that I don't have asthma.
Right.
But it never got corrected to say what it was or to find out why I was having similar symptoms at the time. So my application got rejected for the military. I couldn't continue on the path for training.
And that's when you were 19? 18. Now, and you, if you would have gone to Comox, which is a military airport, and that, you know, and if you would have flown buffaloes, that would have been, for those people that are watching, those are the yellow ones that are flying around. So and beautiful. Usually when they are flying around the buffaloes, then there usually is problems of some sort, right? They are rescue or doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was very passionate about that kind of work, and I thought it would, you know, be meaningful and fulfilling.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a setback. Now what?
It was a very big disappointment. You know, and like I said, I didn't have the money to go to university at the time, and I got the letter in the mail end of August. So, you know, university's first semester would have been coming up in a couple of weeks, and I hadn't applied for any scholarships or any programs. So I was really scrambling last minute to figure out what I would do next. So I enrolled in the University of the Fraser Valley in a business program, a business degree program, because that was what was paired with flying at the time. And,
interesting.
So for the 4-year degree, how they pair it is over the 4 years, you'll do your 4 years of schooling and 4 years of flying, starting with your private license.
Okay.
But it was we didn't quite have enough time to tailor it to the kind of program that I needed on the flying side, because I was coming into the 4-year program already having my private pilot's license. So I was at a different place than my classmates were starting. So it became a frustrating process. So I eventually stopped on the flying side, and I just continued with studies in things that I thought would kind of help progress me as I figured out my next move, my math, my English, sciences. And then I was, you know, in class, and I thought, you know, how cool would it be to go to university, and I'm going to be in a tailored program, in an aviation program with people who are passionate about what they're going to do next, and, you know, whether it's flying or if it was the business side, starting a business. And it really wasn't the case for me. It's not the experience that I had. The more experience that I found was that I'm in this university in Abbotsford where everyone who's gone to high school in the Abbotsford area goes there, and they're still friends with their high school friends and still working their high school jobs. So when it came to like group projects, you know, 2 out of 6 of us would show up to work on the project together, or nobody really had kind of gotten their social skills under their feet yet. You know, whereas the University of British Columbia, you've got people coming from across the country and across the world
All
to
over.
attend, and you have to make friends, or you have to make connections.
Exactly.
Whereas, you know, when I was there, it just didn't seem like people were forced to or wanting to start making those connections early.
Right.
And I thought to myself, well, I don't see myself running a business.
Right.
And so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing studying at this moment. So I'm going to take a step back and work and then figure out what I want to do next.
Yeah.
So I'd worked some odd jobs, and in the meantime, you know, because I'd come from the cadet program, they knew I had aged out of the program at 19. They said, well, why don't you come back, apply as a cadet instructor's cadre officer to teach cadets, and then you can do your training to become a flight instructor on the gliders.
Okay.
So I spent the summer of 2016 in Comox doing that training to become a flight instructor, and then I spent the summer teaching on gliders.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
that's kind of where one area of mentorship really kind of helped pull me.
Did you already have your private license then?
I did, yes.
Where did you get your private license?
In Victoria. Oh, but for my gliders license, I did in Comox as a cadet.
Yeah, but for the private license for your flying, you got in Victoria at YYJ?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And so just, you know, teaching on the gliders, I was kind of going back to the roots of my flying and where I started. We're back to basics. I'm teaching 16-year-olds how to fly gliders in 11-minute flights.
Exactly.
So it was a very hard, very long, very rewarding.
Very rewarding.
Very rewarding summer, and I'm so glad that it was, you know, that I was invited to come and suggested
What
that.
an opportunity, right?
It was a great opportunity, and so that's kind of the first, not the first place that mentorship played in my life, but where it really kind of changed the direction that my life was going to go.
When you finished there in Comic?
I just did the summer, so I was there. I was 19.
Still 19?
Yep, still 19.
young,
Still young. In the meantime, I had another mentor, a family friend of ours, and he had known my family for years, and he, since I was 16, was saying, you know, okay, I'm an air traffic controller. I know you love aviation. Why don't you come to work with me sometime and see what we do on
what a coincidence.
The other side, right? Well, I never had any exposure to air traffic control. No. I always had the exposure to pilots and flying, and that's
most
what
people
I wanted
don't,
to be. So, you know, and I kind of laughed. He said, if you ever needed an alternative career, like, this is a great one. And I said, well, this seems like a great job, but I'm going to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And well, so sure enough, I had put in an application for the company I work for now, Nav Canada. Again, I was 18.
And Nav Canada controls, or pretty well manages all the control towers in Canada, right?
Yes, aside from military, they do the good portion of every control tower, flight service, and control centers across Canada. Yep. Yeah. So you have to be 18 to apply, and you don't need a secondary degree. And so on my 18th birthday, I had reapplied, and then when I turned 19 again, I said, okay, well, I'm going to refresh this application, add in everything I've done since and the experiences that I've had. Yeah. And I heard from them 2 weeks later. So this was about February before I started flight instructing. Yeah. And so I called up this mentor that I had, and I said, I just heard back. They want me to continue in the application process. Yeah. And so he says, okay, there's a new employee referral program. Like, let's sit down, we'll go for coffee, we'll work on your application together. Yeah. And he, you know, really helped me along the way. Yeah. So I went and I continued their testing. And in the testing process, I had gone to the control center in Vancouver. And at some point, I got to take a sneak peek at the simulator for controlling. Yeah. And so they invited me to come and check it out and see what it was. And
did you know somebody on the inside? Because it's hard to get into control towers.
Well, this was for the application. I did my, you know, interview and my testing at the center. So I was already there, and they invited me to come in and look at it. So I'm sitting in the simulator, and they're teaching me the phraseology and just very simple, you know, turn left, turn right, climb, descend. Yeah. And it was a little bit like a video game, planes coming in from every direction, and you just have to get them to one runway. And so I have got a headset on and a foot pedal that triggers the microphone. And
it's the real thing, right?
Well, you did. And so I feel myself kind of get into this rhythm. Okay, which plane am I talking to here? Which plane am I talking to next? And it was like rhythm, it was like music, and I felt the gears in my head start to turn the way they're meant to turn. Like, I love flying. I'm so passionate about flying, but if I did it as a job, I don't know that I would love it as much as I love controlling planes and doing what I do now. But it was the first time that I really thought, I am using my skills and my abilities towards what I am meant to be doing. So that was my aha moment. So I continued with the application process, and I thought I did really well in the testing. Aptitude test, your math, your English, spatial orientation. And so, fast forward, okay, now I'm instructing in Comox, and we're having a briefing one day in the office before all of our students arrive, and we got a break. And I know my email is coming from Nav Canada one day to invite me for an interview. And I'm refreshing under the table and scrolling and refreshing, and we let out for a 5-minute coffee break, and it pops up on my phone. So I run out of the room just outside of the door, and I pull it up. And the first thing that I read is, we thank you for your interest. We encourage you to continue to build your skill base and experience, and keep an eye out for future opportunities with us. And I was crushed. I was so disappointed. I sat on the floor, and I'm crying. I can't control that emotion, so I'm letting it out. And all these high-ranking military officers come out of the room, and they walk past me, and they don't know whether to keep walking and pretend I'm not crying, or to help, and so they're like, okay. And so they kept walking, and so then I get a second email about 5 minutes later as I'm sitting on the floor trying to compose myself to go back into this briefing. And it's from the HR advisor who says, I'm so sorry, my intern sent you the wrong email. You've been accepted to the next phase.
Oh my goodness.
So now I'm still in tears, and I'm laughing. And now all these high-ranking military officers are coming back. She's nuts.
No question about it.
Certifiably nuts. And I'm like, oh no. Okay, well... So they all knew the process that I was going through, and so once I explained what had happened, we're all laughing. And so I got a day's leave to leave from the summer from the base. I flew back to Vancouver. My mom picked me up with my interview outfit and drove me to the center, and it's all gated and secure, so you have to wait outside the door, and you're waiting for an escort to come and bring you in. And I'm kind of pacing in front of the door waiting and trying, my last minute points. What am I going to say in the interview? And how do I close the interview? The end. I'd done tons of interviews with cadets, but the end where they go, do you have any questions for us? Comments? I had never really known exactly what to say. But I'm pacing outside the front door, and there was a plaque on the door, and it said, through these doors walk the most highly trained professionals in the world. And that really just sat with me, and I just internalized it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it was exciting, and I'm here and I'm interviewing. So, I went through my interview, and just preparing for it, I had called up my mentor, and I said, what can you tell me about the person who's doing the interview? Anything that'll help. And I went in and knowing what department for the company he worked for, and that he was ex-military, and great, I can talk. I ended up talking the whole interview about my experience just working on the base in Comox, and the teamwork it took, and the long hours, and just how we came together, and just all the experiences and things that I was going through on the base. And he was very impressed. But not only that, I had done my preparation for the company. I had learned what types of air traffic control there was. So there are two types of air traffic controllers. There are the VFR, or the tower controllers, who work in the towers on site at the airport. And then there's IFR controllers, or center controllers. And centers are not always based at the airport. So the one in Vancouver is actually in Surrey, in an old furniture warehouse building. But these are the men and women sitting there with no windows. It's radar screens wall to wall, and they have a headset and their own sector, and they're talking to their pilots who are between airports and going overseas. And
yeah, so for instance, just kind of mentioning this, that so you step in your plane, you got the tower sitting there. I always looked at the tower, because I know some people in the tower, not only here, but also in YYJ. And, and then having trained there, that, soon as you move the aircraft, then you talk to ground, right?
Yes.
So, or first what you do, you get the weather, forecast. And then from there on in, you talk to ground. And then from there on in, what happens next?
So if you're flying out of Prince George and you're going to Victoria for the weekend, so when like you said, you get your weather and then you talk to ground, okay, and you're going to call them up. They're going to ask you, okay, where are you going if you haven't already filed the flight plan.
Right.
So I look at your plane and I match it with the pilot and the plane, and then we get you moving on the airport. So I determine which direction you're departing in, which runway we're going to use, and that's dependent.
Why not depart wherever is easy?
Well, it depends on the airport. Here in Prince George, we don't have as much traffic as Victoria.
No.
So Victoria's going to have that one runway that's active and everyone's going to be sent for it.
Yeah.
Here, if you're the only plane that's taxiing out at the time, or there's one or two, or you're going to be departing behind a bigger plane, it's going to be easier for me to send you. We have 6 different runway options here in Prince George, so why not use them?
Yeah.
So it's going to depend on the wind. If the wind is particularly strong in a direction, everyone's going to be using that runway. You want to depart into the wind.
Yeah.
If it's calm, I want to know which direction you're going, because that is going to save you fuel and get you to your destination faster. So as I'm talking to you, I'm doing all those calculations in my head, and I'm giving you directions on the airport where I want you to go. I'm making sure that each plane has their own taxi route so that you're not coming nose to nose with another aircraft and then we're pulling you apart. And then we work with the Vancouver Centre controllers. There's a specialty.
And that is Vancouver Centre.
That is Vancouver Centre out of
and
Surrey.
That is IFR, right?
IFR controllers,
yeah.
yes. So
So as soon as the plane leaves here, it is airborne.
Yes.
Then it gets to a certain elevation, and then you give it over to Vancouver Centre.
That's
and
right.
then they change the radio or something for the plane?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in Vancouver Centre, it's going to be made up of a bunch of different specialties. So the specialty that we work with, it's called airports. They work with Kelowna, they work with Prince George, and then they work with a bunch of smaller airports throughout BC. So electronically, we request permission to let you depart if you're an IFR aircraft. If you're a VFR aircraft, we have full control over you.
And VFR is visual flight rules.
Yes.
That where the pilot looks out, and IFR is instrumental flight rules where they set they get their settings from the air traffic controller.
Yes. So if you're going IFR, we get permission from Vancouver to depart you. Once we see it light up green, we can give you your takeoff clearance.
Yeah.
So if you're ever flying IFR and you're sitting on the runway going, why hasn't the controller let me go yet?
Yeah.
And there's no planes around.
Yeah.
That's what we're waiting for.
Yeah.
And so then once we depart you, the procedure here in Prince George, I would give it to you when you taxi out. You would look at your standard instrument departure, and it says, okay, once I hit this altitude, I'm going to change my radio frequency now. I'm going to talk to Vancouver Centre.
Yeah.
Vancouver Centre is going to talk to you all the way down until you're in the Vancouver area.
Is that called flight following?
It can be, yet they do provide flight following service. If you're a VFR aircraft, flight following is just to say, it's a traffic advisory.
They keep an eye on you
They'll
as
keep
you
an
go
eye on
away.
you, make sure you're not around other airplanes.
Yeah.
But they'll make sure you're on the right radio channel so that we can keep constant communication with you. They keep you from creating collisions in the air.
Yeah.
And then once you get close to Vancouver, then they'll pass you back to the Vancouver tower controller at the airport.
Right.
Who then will sequence the planes, who's going to be first, who's going to be second, and so on, and then land you in sequence. And then you'll exit the runway, talk to the ground controller, get to your destination.
So if we were flying Prince George to Victoria, and I do that quite a bit, sitting Pacific Coastal or one of the other airlines, and then flying to Victoria. Well, Victoria is there, but why is the plane going first over Victoria is that a mistake in saying, oh, sorry, that's not the one, I have to go to that one? Not quite.
Because of the proximity of Vancouver and Victoria, you have a lot of bigger airplanes coming into Vancouver that are flying over top of Victoria.
Right.
So if you are being brought out, it's really because we have a lot of planes and this much airspace.
It's very deliberate to do that,
Yes.
And then they fly with the direction of where things are going.
Yes.
So the reason that I just wanted to take you kind of through that so for those people, a lot of people love what is happening in the air. I did as a kid as well. I was born during the Second World War, and then I fell in love with airplanes, although they were not doing good things, they were bombing everything. But at the same time, I also spent 2 years in the Air Force, and I wanted to be a pilot, but it didn't happen that way. I became Air Force Police and Special Forces. Why, I really don't know, but that's what I wanted to do. And then I got my private license in 1967 in, of all places, Watson Lake in the Yukon. But I love airplanes and everything that has a lot to do with airplanes. There's a certain amount of mystique about air traffic controllers, and I believe what you saw when you walked into that control room at YVR or wherever it was, that what it said is that is likely known as one of the most delicate jobs that you can be involved in, because at the same time, if you are air traffic controller, you're watching a number of planes and flying in different directions at different times, and and people that listen to air traffic controllers in particular, anybody would say that listens to it first, what did they say? Because their lingo goes so quick, so fast, and then as you sit there and you fly and you watch a pilot while he is doing other things, and all of a sudden he will hear in the background, he will hear the controller giving him instructions. He will automatically do that, and the lingo, a lot of times anybody that is not involved would not know what are they talking about.
The official language for aviation in the world is English, but aviation is a language of itself. The phraseology you learn, the way you communicate with the planes. We have very strict guides, and even the alphabet. We have words to replace all the letters, and everything is designed to not create confusion and to have clear communication when we are talking to pilots. So as long as everybody's speaking the same language, then it works. And the nice thing is I said from 12 to 19 going through the Air Cadet program, I started out with no knowledge of aviation. And, when I came out, even knowing the phonetic alphabet and, all those words that replace the letters and your numbers and your phrases and how to talk over a radio, those were fundamentals that led into my job. I already had my radio operator's certificate when I walked into Nav Canada, and I said, I got it when I was 14.
Yeah.
And it's good forever.
Yeah.
But so when I was doing that application, I knew these streams. I even knew the third option, flight service specialists. They provide weather advisory, traffic advisories at smaller airports throughout the country. So there was different places I could go in the company. And during this interview, he said, okay, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
And originally I thought I wanted to be an IFR controller, and I knew that they would be running a course the following year, and they said, well, we're putting together a last minute course for a VFR tower. Do you want on? And I said, I'm ready to start tomorrow.
Where was that?
The course I did was in the center in Surrey. They have their schooling, their classroom, the simulators right in the same building where the controllers work.
Yeah.
So that was really cool for me, because I started my training a month later in September, and as I'm training, I'm surrounded by people working the job.
Perfect, right?
Great, building full of mentors and experience, and I took every opportunity to pick people's brains.
So how long did it take you to take the course, and that you were now qualified as a controller?
The initial course for myself, there was 5 air traffic controllers on my course, or trainees. And so between the schooling and the simulator, we finished in about 5 months. And then we got assigned to our towers. So that initial training could take longer depending on what size of class you have. And then once your first tower is assigned by the company just based off of needs, a few years in, then you can be a part of the seniority bidding and, bid to other locations.
Yeah.
But for our class, our options were Langley, Pitt Meadows, and Prince George. So my other two classmates were much more tied to Vancouver than I was.
Yeah.
And they looked at me, the 19-year-old sitting in the classroom, and they said, well, you're going to Prince George.
You were 19.
I was 19 when I did my training.
Is there anybody else 19 as an air traffic controller?
Well, the running...
In Canada?
There might be now, but the running joke was, so NAV Canada privatized from the government, because it used to be run by Transport Canada in 1996, a month before I was born.
Yeah.
So when we were out in the hall celebrating NAV Canada's 20th anniversary, everyone looked at me and said, oh, you haven't even celebrated yours.
Yeah.
So I finished in the school. I had just turned 20, and I moved up to Prince George in March of 2017 to continue my training, because the second portion of the training then is when you start in your tower, you work with an on-the-job instructor.
Yeah.
You're plugged into 2 headsets so that if you make a mistake, the instructor can step in and correct the situation and make sure things stay safe as you're learning. So that's very exciting. That took me another 5 months to complete. And again, depending on which tower you're at, which specialty you're training in, that could take longer. So for a VFR controller in a tower, they say anywhere between 10 to 18 months. For an IFR controller, you're looking at about 2 years of training before you're fully licensed and qualified.
And so there are always 2 people in the tower?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
No, in Prince George, so we mentioned before, you'll talk to a ground controller as you're moving on the ground, then you'll talk to the tower controller for the air. In Prince George, we combine the positions, so you'll have one person working. Yeah,
people then change the radio and then they talk to the same person again, right?
Right.
So,
so typically, except for the very early morning and the very late evening, you'll have 2 controllers here in Prince George. Other airports, somewhere in Vancouver, you could have anywhere between 4, 10 controllers working at the same time, and they all have divided their jobs and which sections they're working in.
There was a little bit of risk here in terms of because of COVID and other related things, they were going to curtail some of the controlled airports, and Prince George was on that list too at one point, but then they changed their mind about it, right?
Yes. So there is, like I said, there is that other service that our company provides, flight service specialists.
Right.
Where they, they'll work in a tower on site as well, but they're not a controller. They provide advisory service. So they'll advise you on the weather, they'll advise you on traffic, but ultimately it's the pilot making their decisions, advising the specialist, and then, doing their job. So how the company decides if it's going to be a tower, which is more expensive to operate, or a flight service station, it's based on the number of aircraft and movements. And Prince George has always been on the cusp of right in between. But anytime they've looked at it before, it's a pretty complex airport. So we have 3 runways that you can depart either end. So that's 6 runway options for us. We have a fire base during the summer where fire aircraft are coming in.
Lots of them.
Lots of helicopters and helicopter training in the spring and the fall, and then participating in fire operations in the summer. We have general aviation and flight schools, small aircraft. We have commercial aviation. So, if you're getting on your flight to Vancouver, Victoria, Edmonton.
Lots of private airplanes.
We run all those flights too. Lots of private aircraft, especially in the summer when the Americans want to come fishing. They fly their private jets up. This is their last fuel stop. So we have a medevac base. So any requirements from the BC Ambulance Service that needs to transfer a patient from one hospital up north where they don't have the same medical access that we do, or if Prince George can't provide it and they need to be flown to Vancouver, we have those planes, and we're a big hub for them to the north. It was very important. So that's, I think, all of those things and factored, even though we might not have met the numbers, the complexity of the operation it really does take that positive control over aircraft to prevent collisions.
And then the uniqueness of the region and all the
Yes.
things that you mentioned, it makes it a special region. Even the community, including myself, made the case, no, you can't do that. This airport must remain as recognized as a very critical airport that needs a control center and all the other things about it.
Yes.
And that will grow and expand.
And we have, despite COVID, we have done a good year with good numbers. And so
Yeah.
the company said, okay, the 7 towers across the country we're looking at, we'll hold off, we'll see how they recover from COVID. And, they may revisit things like changing our hours in the future. So maybe we'll open a little bit later, close a little bit earlier. But the community support that we had and people writing letters to the company was a huge support for
all
us.
of it, right? So.
Yeah.
So now you've been in Prince George for about 3 years?
4.5, it'll be 5 in the spring.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So 5 years.
The 5-year plan.
The 5-year plan. So now you've been here for 5 years and you've been an air traffic controller for 5 years. You're obviously an experienced one. You're still only, I can say that now, you're still only 24.
Yes.
And still very, very young for a seasoned controller, obviously here in Prince George. And, I already know from you, you love the North and you love the Prince George. You told me that before.
Look at this fall we're having. The colors are just beautiful.
Yeah.
If I was still living in Vancouver, it's gray and rainy.
Now, the other thing that I found unique about you, Lucy, has been we talked. The reason that we got together is because there is a program that, that looking at women in aviation, that somebody, I believe her name is Karen, that started something about
Kendra, Kendra Kincaid.
Kendra, and so it said Elevate Aviation, and that is basically how do we get more women involved in aviation. And some of the numbers that I looked at is that, only 6% of women are airline pilots. I thought it was much higher than that, but I got that from the notes. And then the other part, fewer than 5% of women fly transport aircraft. And then 3, it says females mechanics is only 2%. And then 4, only 11% of airspace engineers are women, and only 16% have jobs as traffic controllers. 16%, a bit higher than I thought it was compared to the other numbers, but still by comparison very low. And then the less than 19% of the Canadian are in the Canadian Air Force are women. So clearly a huge opportunity for women.
Yes.
Right? And then my thought is, why is that? And then obviously with the Elevate Aviation and more and stimulate more women into the airline or air industry, became an initiative. So tell us about that. And you are the representative for this region or for BC. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So once I kind of got settled into my career, and I didn't know anyone in Prince George when I started here. I honestly couldn't point it out on a map when I left Vancouver, and so after having been here for a couple of years and settling in, I was really looking for some volunteer projects, or how could I kind of be a part of the community or build myself a community, knowing that I was going to be here at least for my 5-year plan.
Right.
I had to make it home.
Right.
And so I was looking for ways on how to do that.
Right.
And my manager had gone to a conference, an international conference for women controllers, and had met Kendra Kincaid, who started this organization. And since I've talked to Kendra, she always laughs and says, Elevate was kind of an accident how it started. She got a bunch of women in aviation together for another project, and they said, hey, wait, this is great. We can't stop this. We have to build on where we're at. So that started in 2015, and it's grown today for so many programs, but the one I got first involved with is called the Cross Country Tour.
Right.
So my manager, Jessica, had come back to Prince George and said, I met Kendra, and she asked if we want to host a cross country tour in Prince George, and do you want to be in charge of it? And I said, sure.
Yeah.
What am I doing? What do I have to do? What did I say yes to?
Yeah.
But it had kind of developed my philosophy of just saying yes to opportunities and to meeting people and to opening doors, because I never, knew where it was going to lead. And just saying yes and doing things just always opened doors for me. So I agreed to do it, and I started learning from a fire hose again. And I realized there was a lot entailed, and, what do I have to learn to organize and do this and make it happen? So what it ended up being was the first year in 2015, they did it at Edmonton. Now they've expanded to hosting at 35 airports across the country and more, and growing every year. But I went out and I spoke at high schools and the college and university, and I was inviting young women who were looking at, okay, what's your career going to be? Where do you see yourself in the industry? How can you take your skills and apply them in the working world? And so I brought them to the airport. I brought in female speakers to come and talk about their jobs.
And they are again available through Elevate Aviation, the special speakers, right?
No, well, that year we did have some special speakers from Elevate come and help me and support me in running my first cross-country tour. Right. But really, I when I planned the 2020 tour, I reached out to women in Prince George. Something that was very interesting for me is because I work in the tower, I don't go down to the terminal lots. I don't meet a lot of the other airport workers here. Right. But through this initiative, it forced me to go and knock on people's doors and talk to them. Sure. I learned that we had a female manager in the tower, and myself up there, and another retired controller who was a woman. Air Canada Jazz, WestJet Encore, Central Mountain Air, Pacific Coastal, all of them base managers here in Prince George are women.
Amazing, eh?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that was something very neat that I got to learn about my own airport, my own community. Yeah. So I thought, well, we have speakers right here. I'm going to start pulling from this pool.
Great idea.
Female helicopter pilots, female aircraft maintenance engineers, all based right here in Prince George.
Sure.
So I really wanted to encompass that in the 2020 tour, which ended up being canceled, but we are in the planning works for 2022 now, this coming spring. Yeah. So I have lots of people to reach out to. And then the day evolved after that, just, presentations on their career, young women getting to ask and have conversations with them. We had a sponsored lunch, so the event is completely free for women to attend. And then in the afternoon, I had set up different tours at facilities around the airport. So we toured the helicopter hangar and the RCMP and an aircraft maintenance engineering hangar where they had pulled out parts of aircraft that they were fixing and let the girls hold them and touch them and explore them. And we brought them up to the tower and to the fire hall operations side of the airport. And it really just gave them a behind the scenes look at careers. Because when you think of aviation and aviation careers, you think pilot and flight attendant.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's so much more that goes into it. And even I'm still learning the careers out there. Yeah. And through Elevate Aviation, I've even met women who said, my niche isn't out there yet. I'm going to make my own, and have started their own consulting or safety in aviation or wherever they fit in. Yeah. Started their own businesses. Yeah. And I think that's so phenomenal. So, and the goal of this cross-country tour is career exploration and just exposure, exposure that you wouldn't normally get. So I loved getting to bring that to Prince George for the first time. I'm so excited to continue bringing that program. Yeah. And it was such a success here that my involvement with Elevate Aviation, I was like, okay, I want to get more involved. I want to learn more. So every year they do a fundraising gala. And so that year in 2019, I drove out to Edmonton, I put on a fancy dress, and I got all dressed up, and my sister came with me.
Yeah.
And we went to this gala.
Yeah.
And I learned that each year at this gala, they feature 8 women in aviation from across Canada in different various careers, and just to share their stories and be the Inspire features for that year.
Right.
And so we're sitting at the table in the gala, and they're introducing the features from that year. They had a doctor, civil scientist, astronaut candidate. They had women who had created their own aviation consulting businesses. They had a military pilot that was a woman. They had an air traffic controller, and so on and so forth. And so, they talk about their careers, and they had shot these little 1.5-minute videos that showcased what these women do and who they are. And I just remember my sister's jaw dropped, and she goes, "Wow, they're really setting the bar high in this room, and these are your people. Like, this is your industry." And we spent the whole night just shaking hands and introducing ourselves and listening to people's stories. And I was so fascinated, so engaged that, okay, my interest went another level, and I kept learning more. So just to talk about some of the other projects that Elevate is a part of, they have a mentorship program. Yeah. So, I had a young lady come up to me after this cross-country tour saying, "I'm really passionate and I want to be an astronaut when I grow up one day." Well, we don't really have a lot of astronauts here in Prince George. So I said, "But I know one through Elevate Aviation, and she's in our mentor pool." So that's kind of the goal of the mentorship program, is how do we connect women who are wanting to be in the aviation industry with women who are already in successful careers
and willing to communicate
it. And the more you talk to women in their professions, the more, or and even men too, right? I know lots of pilots who you show this interest in what they do, and they just want to share all of their knowledge with you.
Same as entrepreneurs in business, right? So
exactly, like you're almost intimidated at first to ask the question.
It should not be, right? So because a lot of times they love to talk to people that have an interest.
Right. So as soon as this mentorship program kicked off, we have a countrywide network of women ready to support other women and young ladies who want to come up into the industry. Yeah. And even for me, like, in career jumps, I think, okay, like, where do I go next? How do I grow my career? Am I happy where I'm at? So we have different levels of mentorship. We have introductory mentorship. We have training mentorships. We have mentorships for people who want to grow and, prosper their careers. So
now somebody will watch this podcast and obviously be very interested in what you have to say and to hear your career. And again, everything is possible, right? And and through circumstance, your dream was airplanes right from when you were very, very young. And so, if somebody is watching it, where do they go for information? Is there a website they should?
If they go to the Elevate Aviation website, they can connect to the mentorship program. They can fill out their information. And then what happens is this year I actually took on the role as the BC Mentorship Lead and Coordinator. So then those emails then come to me, and I'll set up an introductory, a Zoom call or a phone call, get to know a little bit more about you and where you're at and what your goals and aspirations are, what kind of career you want to explore. And then I go through my database or my connections, and I find the right woman to pair you with, and I put the two of you in touch, and then from there, hopefully a really wonderful mentorship relationship starts from there.
Yeah, and could be as simple initially to kind of go to the airport, kind of get a better feel of it, lots of information on Google, potentially thinking about private pilot license, and then it appears to me, as it is in a lot of areas, that there is a real shortage of workers, and air traffic controllers is one that we are reminded of often as flyers because a lot of times the airplane is delayed because there is a shortage of air traffic controllers on a particular location.
Right.
YVR is a good example.
Lots of shortage. Sometimes that's due to just the amount of aircraft coming in at the same time. We can only get so many planes on the runway at once.
Exactly.
But, so we time it out and we space it out. But it's been a couple of hard years through COVID for aviation, for sure. There were lots of layoffs and lots of uncertainty and not knowing when the industry was going to return, and we're still not there at full capacity.
But that applies to everything.
It applies to everything. The aviation industry is going to have good years, it's going to have bad years, but you'll find that people who work in aviation are so passionate about what they do, much like reading your book and your stories, that starting over was just what you did.
Yeah.
Because you had your goal, you had your dreams, you knew where you were going next.
Yeah.
And so, it's been a rough couple of years, but now we find Air Canada, WestJet, they're recalling all of their flight attendants and all of their pilots, and we start to see that turnover. Okay, now they've recalled their staff and they're still not filling capacity. So they start bringing from the smaller airlines, and the smaller airlines are hiring flight instructors, and now there's not enough flight instructors to teach new students to, fill up the chain. So we are going to come back, and we are going to come back.
And I can see it on the parking lots, like in Victoria or Vancouver, YVR here. I have many pictures all throughout the 19 months. Every week I would do at least 4 or 6 flights, and fortunately I was able to do that. But a lot of times I got pictures of me walking sea gates in Vancouver, which is probably 300 feet long. I don't know how long. And I take a picture, there's nobody around, or I'm the only guy in the plane.
Right.
So but now the planes are getting fuller again to where you can see, it's working. Everybody's feeling better, and and hopefully COVID obviously is going in the right direction. To me, it looks like an amazing opportunities in the air industry, whatever direction that may take. And what I would like to see here in northern BC, because things are expanding here all the time, and with the College of New Caledonia and potential, in particular, that to see the courses that you initially attended in Vancouver when you were 17 or so, and then those kind of things at the college level.
I would love to see programs come to the school that are attached to a flight school. The same way, when I first started out, in Abbotsford, and where I could take classes towards a degree or to certificates or trades, and I'm doing my flight training on the side.
Yeah.
I think that would be really great up here.
Yeah.
And then another thing that we're kind of, looking ahead to, so some of the other programs with Elevate Aviation, they're looking at these shortages and saying, okay, how can we fill those gaps? Well, one of them is, those low stats of women in it. What if we brought those up? Okay, so what is stopping women from getting into aviation? So we have one program, it's called the Economic Security for Women Through Aviation. So it's a 3-part program, and the first phase looks at, okay, so what are the barriers? Why are women not getting into aviation? Is it not having enough exposure? Is it not saying you can do this? And that's part of the mentorship program, is saying, this is a good fit for you. You are more than capable of doing this job.
And that may well be the key step, Lucy, because it is not as accessible as and your program in particular. It opens a door into it, plus it has those connections, and that's why I thought it was so important to have you on this podcast, to at least open the door and show the opportunities in terms of from a career perspective, and also from BC and Canada as a whole. All of those particular jobs are amazing career opportunities, and the industry, in spite of all the things that have happened and are behind us, is only going to grow and get bigger. And
Right.
you know, so, and I certainly, I think in another week or two, I'm going to have Dr. Dennis Johnson on a podcast, and certainly share that with him as well. That you know, I believe that there are more opportunities for the college in terms from a career perspective and training perspective.
Well, you know, and then we don't just look at the barriers. So then our next phase is we talk to the industry partners, the airlines, the, you know, the private companies, air traffic control, all of the companies. And we say, okay, what do you need? What do you need potential applicants to come with?
Exactly.
And then phase 3 is, okay, how can we apply strategic action? What can we do to help bridge that gap from, you know, where people are to where they're ready? So we have the Elevate Aviation Learning Center. It's based out of the Edmonton International Airport, and they are expanding into Calgary. It was delayed due to COVID. So some of the programs that we have there, we have junior jets from 5 till 11, which can be school programs, in-person talks, online, just exposure for young kids. And then we have exploration camps that can be anywhere from, you know, a school field trip to a week-long camp for
And
girls,
all those
boys.
are online, right?
They're all online too. There's
Yeah.
a wealth of information on the Elevate
Yeah.
Aviation website. But the funds that we're raising this year at our gala are going specifically to a new designed program. It'll be an 18-week program designed more towards low income, women who are starting over, women escaping domestic abuse and violence. And this program will take them and teach them industry ready skills so that when they leave this Elevate Aviation program that's recognized by our industry partners, they can go and take those skills and walk in to job training.
Prepares them really for the job, and so that as they walk into the area that does the interview, no different than what happened to you.
Yes.
You know, obviously, from the time that you were 8, you were prepared, and then over and beyond. And so once you walked in as a candidate, as a air traffic controller, you had all the skill set that you required.
Right.
But then Elevate Aviation was not an entity that was already there. That is there now, and it offers those kind of skill sets. And I believe that you know, for a lot of people are somewhat intimidated by the whole you know, mystique around flying and all the things that are happening. But it's what I know from my own personal experience. It's an amazing world to you know, be involved in it from a career perspective. May that be in the tower, or may it be as a pilot or a mechanic, or it is an amazing career and very exciting.
Yeah.
The other thing that you know, before we end our podcast, so as you look forward now you're sitting here, you are a you know, a highly skilled air traffic controller, and at 24, and living in you know, northern British Columbia. What does the future look like for you? Because I believe, and I'm saying that somewhat, you are a planner already from you know, from early start.
Yes.
So now you 5-year program that you came to Prince George with. So what program are you working on now, looking forward to the next 5 years?
So I do have a couple of goals and a couple of ideas, because life always has its way of working out in its own way.
Yeah.
So one thing that I want to do with Elevate Aviation, and we've talked about, is we have that learning center in Edmonton and then soon to be Calgary, but I would love to deploy some of those programs or week-long camps. I would love to bring that to Prince George and you know, host you know, one of those week-long exploration camps here and make it more accessible for people. So that's kind of one of my passion projects for aviation while I'm here. In the meantime, my partner and I have bought a house this year. We are welcoming a couple of dogs into our home next week. Thank you. You know, we're loving our life. He works at the airport too, so I mean, we've got lots on the aviation side going on, but you know, lots of home building projects and renovations and dog walks in our future, and
beautiful.
You know, so just enjoying this part of life. we have talked about, what might be a potential move, and he's from Calgary. My family now lives in Edmonton, so we have talked about, making the jump to a bigger tower as a career challenge for myself. And so, maybe Calgary Airport has a future in store, but I love what I've done here and am doing, and for Elevate Aviation, and bringing that to the community of Prince George. So I really just want to focus on where I'm at and make sure that is on a good solid foundation. I would love to see it continue to flourish and hand it off, if I do leave cities, or be able to come back. But really, I've achieved that goal of wanting to be around planes and wanting to establish my career and be in a good place in my life. So, and one of the great things about being a controller is you say you go to work, you plug in, you go home. You don't take that work with you. You're not up all hours of the night thinking about your job. So you really get to go and live your life. And so I do a lot of camping with my family and traveling when I can. And and I'm 24, so now I have lots of time to dream big and figure out what that next down the road goal is. But I really just am enjoying my life where I am now.
Yeah, and I think the College of New Caledonia is certainly something that you should get. We should get in touch with them, and I'm certainly going to raise it with them as well. So Lucy, it was a pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Thank you so much.
And you are an inspiration. So
thank you.
Thank you again for having you on my show. And for our guests that have been watching, all about airplanes to a certain extent, but also about selecting a career very early in life, and then driving to that goal every step of the way. And so for the young people that, and the ones that are not quite so young anymore, but that are still looking for satisfaction in life in terms of choosing a career, always believe that, at least from my perspective, has always been that attitude, avoid the negative, passion, find the love that you like to do, whatever that may be. You want to be a carpenter, or you want to be involved in aviation or the lumber industry, find your passion, and then work ethic, and what follows is success. Thank you again for being on the podcast.